Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is I, Jeff Vieira, the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. Back to Breitbart today for a story for you. Bokhari, everything you post online will be scanned by hate speech algorithms. Breitbart News technology reporter Alam Bokhari appeared on the Liz Calloway show on Talk 94.5 FM WTKN last week to discuss revelations in his upcoming book, #Deleted, Big Tech's Battle to Erase the Trump Movement and Steal the Election, which features interviews with insiders from Google, Facebook, and other companies. A source close to Google and other tech giants has said that the book, which lifts the lid on Big Tech's 4-year plot to undermine the Trump movement and influence the election, will shake the foundations of Silicon Valley. The things I've heard from my sources inside Silicon Valley is quite terrifying, said Bokhari. Increasingly, with these hate speech algorithms, everything you post on social media will be scanned by an AI algorithm, sometimes before you even post it, and that'll determine whether it appears at the top of people's feeds or gets buried. A lot of conservative content is way more popular than left-wing content. It does very well unless there's some artificial manipulation. Calloway and Bokhari also recapped the Google tape, a 1-hour recording of the tech giant's top executives. They were completely stunned by it. You can go and watch the video. Sergey Brin said the decision of the American voters offended him. He compared Trump voters to extremists. He was talking about Trump voters in the same way that he might have talked about ISIS. I'm sure many other people inside many other companies were dismayed at the election result, but these people control the most powerful company in the world. What's scary is this: there's no law and no regulation in stopping these people from interfering in the election. Bokhari also explained how Facebook and Google have become editor-in-chief to the world due to a large number of publications that depend on them for traffic. When Facebook comes in with a rule change, or when there's a sense that they're going to downrank certain content in the algorithm if you say the wrong thing, publications are going to adjust their editorial standards and how they write their stories and what they write about in response to what Facebook and to a large extent Google is doing. Essentially, Zuckerberg has this editorial control over every online publication that's dependent on his platform. That's a huge number of news publications around the world. I don't think anyone's ever had that much power over the global news economy. #Deleted will be released on September 22nd. Okay, so a couple of days ago, we talked about this story where innocent little Facebook was just conducting some survey research on 400 to 600,000 people, or I'm sorry, was it 200 to 400,000? I forget the number. It was a really big number. And they were going to pay up to $60 million in order to get these people to stop using Facebook for 6 weeks in the run-up to the election. A company paying people, certain people, mind you, to stop using their platform. A company that relies on advertising revenue, which relies in turn upon maximizing the views. Why would they do such a thing? Well, as we discussed in that podcast, which, by the way, was an instant classic, should be recorded over into hard media, placed in a time capsule somewhere, so that future generations may partake of the shared genius of it. We pointed out a couple of inconvenient truths regarding Facebook that ties into the story that we have here today. There was one very compelling reason for Facebook to spend that money. Did you guys get it? I left it kind of open-ended at the end of that podcast. Crack open the time capsule and re-listen if you must. The reason that they would spend $60 million to do that is because it would prove Facebook's indispensability to the Democrat Party, and by extension to the deep state in the United States of America. It would set Facebook up as the primary way to oppress the American people, to censor them the way the Chinese people and other unfree peoples of the world are censored. And to do so unobtrusively, through the power of the algorithm. Why? Have you ever noticed that sometimes when you try to post something on Facebook, Facebook doesn't allow the post? Almost like it's reading what's in your clipboard before you attempt to post it. Now, that's probably at the domain level. I've noticed that when I modify the address for the domain component of it, that sometimes I can slip it through. But using natural text language kind of algorithms, I suspect that that is merely a stopgap. And that Zuckerberg and his little band of deviants have something even better in mind in their estimation. Remember, Google has been winning the Be Evil war. Google helped China set up the Great Firewall of China. So that when you go to China, you won't see anything on the internet there that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want you to see. That was enabled with Google's technology. That gave Google a lead within the New World Order. And Zuckerberg wants that lead back. You'll also notice that per the article's observation here, if you follow YouTube, you'll have seen YouTube content creators doing exactly what the author says with regard to rules changes. Google owns YouTube. And so whenever they change a rule in their algorithms, which flags certain content, creators have to figure out a euphemism to avoid saying that. Now, mind you, this is within a video. So their algorithms are capable of going through and scanning hours and hours of video and pulling out audible utterances of words that they have deemed to be offensive. That is how you look for what they call hate speech. Now, mind you, they haven't done this with, say, beheading videos that ISIS puts up as recruitment tools on the platforms. No, that's not hate. Because in the eyes of Google and Facebook, the jihadis are killing all the right people. They don't do that with child pornography. No, in fact, they go the other way. One of the words that YouTube content creators have to stay away from is pedophilia. So how do you cover Epstein and Maxwell and Clinton and Richardson? How do you cover that? Prince Andrew, Dershowitz. How do you cover that whole scandal if you're not allowed to say pedophile? It is a pedophilia scandal. And that is why the algorithm will not allow you to post it. Because guess what pedophiles do not do when they put up their child pornography content? They don't use the word pedophile. They don't use the word pornography. They don't use the word child. They use euphemisms, pizza and the like. It's easy to do when you're in on the game. It's easy to do when your teammates are the referee. So we already see YouTube creators having to preserve their YouTube income streams by towing whatever party line and avoiding speaking whatever shibboleth the un-American CEO of the Alphabet Company decides needs to be forbidden. for whatever purpose he may have. Now I ask you, Americans, who gave these people such power? Did you vote for them? I don't think so. They appeared on no ballot whatsoever, unless you happen to be a shareholder of their companies. Did you elect to make them monopolies? I don't believe so. Many Americans don't use their products. They're what we call wise. But your government has. The reason why Google and Facebook are what they are is because they were given a special exemption in the law. That exemption defines them as neutral internet service providers rather than as publishers. Publishers, you see, are legally responsible for what they publish. And so, a publisher needs to be careful not to present lies, not to support criminal enterprises, because they will be sued out of existence. Facebook and Google don't have to worry about that. So Facebook and Google can embrace ISIS all they like. They can cheer on pedophiles and give them a platform for grooming our kids. They are allowed because our government has allowed them. Now, our government is comprised allegedly of people that you have voted for. But what if their buddies at Google and Facebook could help ensure that that's not true either? What if the government could get away with not holding fair elections, with not counting ballots, and you would be none the wiser because they simply won't be reported? Indeed, if you wanted to go around government media to report on what you're actually seeing, such as, say, citizens of Minneapolis who have been posting videos of the devastation the Democrat riots have caused downtown, how do you get the message out? You use a platform such as Facebook or Instagram, which Facebook owns, or YouTube, which Google owns. Do you see the problem here? I remember the good old days when lefties used to complain about the centralization of media, about how just a few corporations controlled so much of what we see. Haven't heard that complaint in a while. Can you think of why? Just sort of dropped off the radar. It's no longer an issue. I guess other issues have come to the fore, like the need to overturn the results of elections. The need to do away with elections. That trial balloon was floated early on. They didn't like it because Trump leapt at it. Okay, sure, we'll do that. And then suddenly they reconsidered the plan. We have, with the internet, something that was designed explicitly to make the world more free. Those of us who are cynics were not surprised that it was instead almost immediately turned to something to enslave us, who were the early adopters on the internet. It was the pornographers. Why was that? Why was that? It was because the internet was a lot more effective way of enslaving people to pornography addiction than the back room at your local video store or at a specialty store for such things, or in the brown paper bags these things would be placed into at a gas station out in the middle of nowhere. the ubiquitousness of pornography is directly due to the internet. It's funny how when they want you to see things, it becomes very easy to see them. On the other hand, where's all the protest against the shutdown of religious services across the United States? Mind you, not all religious services. Mosques have been allowed to operate as before. Don't want to upset our jihadi buddies. But Christian services in particular. Do you think it's because there is no protest? Do you think it's because people are happy with the dispensation of their Sunday obligation? Do you think that they're content to view their service over the internet? How the internet made that easier, huh? No, you have to think about these things from a variety of perspectives, and you have to ask yourself constantly, why is this being done? That's why the cultural lens is so valuable. What does it say about American culture in our day and age that we would accept being ruled over by a loser like Mark Zuckerberg? If you saw Mark Zuckerberg in a bar, would you have a drink with him? I wouldn't. The same goes for the top brass and founders of Google. If you just saw them on the street, would you have anything to do with them? I suspect the answer for most Americans is not on your life. And yet, these are the unelected, true rulers of the United States of America in 2020. They determine what gets discussed. They determine who gets to discuss. And they have access to your most sensitive information. Why? Because you put it online. If you want to know why so many politicians are being blackmailed into obedience today, why don't you have that beer with Mark Zuckerberg? Why don't you sit down with Sergey Brin and ask them? Since you can't do anything about it, they may well tell you. I'll share a little hopeful note, however, and that's a little bit of wisdom that came down to me, I forget from whom. But it says simply this: that which cannot continue indefinitely must eventually stop. And that is certainly the case with big tech. You see, people don't like being enslaved. That's not what we're called to be. Like a raccoon stuck in a trap, many of us would rather gnaw off our own leg than not be free. And there are many more of us than there are of our would-be slave masters. And there will always come a reckoning. Thank you and have a great day.